Welcome back to the Context Coaching Podcast. We are joined this morning all the way from Kansas with Cody Bartlow, who is the head men's soccer coach at Kansas Wesleyan University, where on April 7th, when we are recording, it is colder than it should be, to quote Coach. So, Coach, welcome. Thanks for being here today. Appreciate having you on.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you having me for sure.
Do me a favor, take us through your background. How did you end up in coaching? What was the transition from your days as an athlete into the coaching phase of your life and all the steps in between that led to you being at Kansas Wesleyan this year?
Yeah, for sure. So I actually never thought I was going to be a coach. Didn't really have great coaches growing up, so it was never just in my viewpoint of this is the direction of my life. So I actually started coaching back in high school. We had to do a senior project in my senior year to graduate from LD Bell High School down in Hurst, Texas. And so didn't know what I really wanted to do. Was planning to do journalism in college at that time, but for as far as project, didn't really have to have a mentor and stuff like that. So I actually ended up coaching a U6 Coed soccer team with my English teacher. Her son was on the team and went out there and just fell in love with it. Just absolutely loved it. And so I've been coaching ever since. So going into year 25 now, coming this fall. So I've been doing it for quite a while. And then the pathway from there it was a wreck at the very start, going through those high school years and early college years, and then went into club soccer in the Dallas area, did that for a very long time. Got to coach at Dallas Baptist University for a year under Michelle Leonard, who's now the Baylor women's head coach. Went over to a school called Northwood University in Cedar Hill, Texas. Worked under a guy named Krasi Kolaroff, who was an amazing guy. Looked like a Olympic shot putter, and then was the most athletic guy I've ever seen at that age. Would jump in goal and just go flying across, and you're like, you shouldn't be able to move that quickly, that big. But then I was set to take a higher role at Northwood, and then they actually closed down that college campus. And so I had a decision to make. I had young kids at that time, so it was chase the college game or stay in DFW, be a dad and stuff. So obviously I did that. Did the did the club game again for a long time. Ended up as a coach at a private Christian school in Flower Mound, Texas, coaching a co-ed team actually, playing in the men's division. And so that first year we missed the playoffs by a game, but we tied the eventual state champion. So that was fun to watch their coach freak out on that game. And after that, I split the teams into men's and women's programs, started the first women's program at Corndale, went on a really good run of success there. If I remember right, we won 5 district championships on the men's side, 4 on the women's, made 2 state semifinals. So did a really good run, had a really good coaching staff with me as well that was there. Ended up working my way up into an athletic director position from there. And then when COVID hit, man, I just felt like I was being called back in the college game. Showed obviously that the time that we think is coming isn't always there for us. Left a very nice paying job to take a $1,000 a month assistant job in Oklahoma City, and then ended up driving back down to Dallas 3 days a week to do club because it just paid so much better so I could make ends meet. And then from there, parlayed that into a head coaching job up in Nebraska at Midland University, and then ended up coming down to Central Christian, where I spent 2 years, first as a men's coach, and then last year I took over the women's program as well. So I did both programs. And then I've just actually about a month ago now moved over here to Kansas Wesleyan.
Okay, so this is super recent. When I framed it as this year, I didn't even realize it was.
Yeah, no, it's super recent. So we had a week of training, and then we had spring break. And then so we're in 2 weeks of training, getting ready now. So we've actually already trained this morning. And then actually I've got cupcakes behind me because it's actually my birthday today. So
Happy birthday, Coach.
Thank you. Thank you.
Welcome to the show. Let's celebrate by me asking the question that I ask every soccer coach I have on here because it fascinates me and I just want everybody's take. Why do y'all call it training and not practice?
So it's funny. So I've actually called it practice for pretty much everything my whole life. And I recently changed it to training. I think for me, as I've developed as a coach, for me, the mindset switch in that so much of the American-based sports are coach-led, right? You have the ability to dictate plays. You have the ability to really set up and practice what you're going to put on the pitch or what you're going to put on the court, the field, whatever it may be. And I've coached American football. I've coached track and field. And so like I've coached in different areas as well. When it comes to soccer, there's no timeouts, right? You have limited subs, especially as you're playing at the higher levels. You have limited subs, or your subbing moments are very different, right? And you can't practice it. You can only train scenarios and hope that you're preparing them well enough to come in. Because the reality is, we put together all the training, all the prep work into it. And then we go out there and I've got to trust 18 to 24-year-olds for 45 minutes that they hopefully don't. They do what we need to do, and we're not out of a game at halftime, right? When I'm doing club, I've got to trust 17 and 18-year-olds to go out there for 45 minutes with little guidance and make it work. So I think that's why we call it training. At least that's why I've switched to calling it training, is because for me, practice is like the old saying, practice makes perfect or practice makes permanent. Like in soccer, that's just not true.
I love that. That might be the best answer I've gotten on the subject matter, but it always makes me chuckle as a basketball coach. Damn near 30 years in, I've never said, "Hey guys, we got training today." So I'm always trying to get smarter and pick the brain of my soccer colleagues. So thank you for that. The other thing I'm curious about right off the bat is you said, at least for the 1 year at the high school level, I think you said you coached a co-ed team. Would love
Yeah.
to know more about that. I know you started as a U6 co-ed coach, but let's fast forward to the high school level.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's relatively, I don't want to call it abnormal, but that's not the usual setup at most schools. So would love to get your take on that, what you learned from working with a co-ed team versus a single gender, and how that has since informed your approach to training, shall we call it?
Yeah, so when I took the job at Cormdale, they had always been either a boys team or a co-ed team. They didn't have enough girls that were interested in playing at that school before I'd gotten there. And that first year we took over, we had, oh man, it's making me think back. I'd say we had probably 6 to 8 girls on the team. And so we played the whole year. We'd always have at least 2 girls on the pitch at all times. And so as we were playing, what for me it was interesting, because even after I split the programs, like our school was K through 12. I think total students, there's probably 200 students at the school, 250. So small school, but we kept the middle school co-ed all the way through I was there, because what I saw is, if you've coached on both genders, you'll know obviously you'll have the athleticism and the speed on the guy's side. It's going to be higher. And then the girls are just smarter, right? They listen, they want to do things well. And so for us, like we kept the middle school co-ed because the girls got to play at a faster pace with the guys, right? And they got to be more physical. So when they stepped in the girls' game, they were the bullies a little bit. And then the guys had to actually just slow down and think, which, if you think about middle school boys, is not the main privy of what they do. So it made them actually slow down and think and just calm down a little bit and play a little bit. But yeah, working with both, I've been blessed to have coached on both sides. And I think I've coached on the women's side for the vast majority of my career. And I think that's made me such a better coach on the men's side. But then also coaching on the men's side makes me a vastly better coach on the women's side, because like I see things develop quicker on the women's game than I would have if I've never coached on the men's side. So yeah, I mean, I think there's value in all of it. And then I think the other part is just, it's very obviously different when you deal with boys versus girls and your conversations with them, how you give critiques, all these different things. The guys, you can tell them like, they're playing terrible, they need to pick it up. And then you don't have to worry about what you say a lot of times. You can just say it that plainly and they're like, yeah, I know. The girls, you gotta have an understanding of where they're coming from. And for us, me, my staff, when we were coaching on the women's side, we've always realized, like, on the girls' side, like they've had so many coaches or so many people throughout their lives that have actually torn them down, that you don't need to tear them down. You need to build them up. And the guys are naturally be more egotistical and more think that they're going to go all pro, whereas the girls aren't even thinking about it. So the girls are so much better than they think they are, that you have to build that up. And the guys are so much not as good as they think they are. So you don't have to tear them down, but you have to bring them to reality a little bit and say, hey, if you want to get there, this is actually where you're at. And then these are the levels we're going to have to take. Whereas the
Yeah.
girls, you're like, girls, you're already here, but you're acting like you're down here. Like, we don't even need to take these steps. You're already there. I just need you to take these steps over here. And that first one starts with that look in the mirror and that belief. Yeah, I think it's made me honestly a much better coach, because I've had those experiences. I've been able to feed into different people at different age groups. And that's been a blessing for me, is coaching middle school age all the way up into obviously now college. And now UPSL, I coach at UPSL level. So you've got some semi-pro type of ages. And so I've got everything from 16-year-olds all the way up to 28-year-olds that play for me right now. So yeah, so having that experience, and then for me as well, coaching over various sports, I think that's really helped. But yeah, being able to coach co-ed, I think was great, because you really got to see what people could do.
Mm-hmm.
And that belief from the guys side fed in the girls.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, that maturity from the girls side fed into the guys. I think that's what made that group, especially at CDA, was really special.
Yeah, it's interesting in the way you frame that, because it's what I say all the time to our kids. I've primarily been a men's coach and just finished year 3 as the women's coach. And I say, look, guys are irrationally confident and delusional. And girls, it's for the most part, and this is a blanket generality, obviously, but are struggling with what you said, belief and self-confidence. And it's, look, I need you to believe in yourself this or the same way I do. And to your point, guys, it's no, you can't make that shot. Stop doing that. And so it's a fascinating thing that you've also noticed. What have you found success with in trying to pour into your female athletes or lead them to the belief that you may have that is being undermined by whatever other noise is out there or even internally? Because that's the struggle I've had. It's like ultimately, hey, listen, stop doubting yourself. You're fine. Do this and it's all good. And yet it's a challenge, right? Where I'm like, I need you to be a psycho irrational confidence person like this guy.
Yeah. No, I think for me, like, it always starts with, like, for us, we spent so much time with building into just the relationship with the athletes, right? Where and it's to a point where, like, I've almost been detrimental to my program in the past few years, because I've wanted that, because I've always had that so strong with my teams that I felt like they, like, bypassed assistants sometimes. And I wanted them to have those relationships as well. So I kind of, like, step back and let them build those purposely. But then at the same time, I'm like, I should really need to get stronger in that. But no, like, the biggest thing for me is we were very intentional. So it was always started every season. I still do. What's your why? Like, why do you really do it, honestly? Because that obviously is going to give you the insight of what it is. And then understanding what's truly important. So even like when I was recruiting on the women's side, one of the biggest questions we always asked is, if you were to get married today, who would be your maid of honor and why? And because it just gave me insight into who their best friend was and why that person was so important to them. And so that insight then obviously gives me the ability to come alongside and coach, kind of feeding into those positive. She always believed in me. She's always talking positivity. When I'm not there, she'll pull me aside. Hey, I know this isn't you, and stuff like that. And so that gave me so much insight into that person's psychology coming into preseason already. So I knew how to approach that. So that was a big thing. But the other part was, they're all different. So I had a girl that played for us at Corndale. Her name was Hannah Russell. She played on the #1 club team in America. And so constantly was playing. They'd play for like the national championship in ECNL, which that was when that's ECNL is still the biggest thing on the girls' side. But she played for the national championship in there a few times. She had a full ride to Oklahoma State as a freshman. This is before they changed the rules. She had a full ride to Oklahoma State as a freshman, like, really good player. And I remember that we had this one game and we get a free kick from by the sideline, but just inside the center circle area, and from about 10 yards from half. And she had a leg on her. And I was like, and she comes over, I go, Hannah, shoot, score it. And she was like, I can't kick it that far. I'm like, yeah, you can. I was like, just score it. And she's like, Cody, I can't do it. And I'm like, Hannah, I go, just go hit the crossbar. Just try it for me. And she goes, drops it in perfect. And then she freaks out and jumps up and down. It's funny. And she still will talk to me to this day about it. And she's also going to be, she watches this, she'll be like, what the heck? Called me out. But it was stuff like that. And then I had another player who, she was so hard on herself. And so if I saw her get in her head, she's an attacking player, really creative for us. I would call her over and I'd be like, hey, and I'd have the winger step in and cover, and we'd all cover for it for 30 seconds. And she'd come over, I'm like, hey, I got to tell you, like, I need this to happen real quickly. And she's like, okay, what's up? And I'm like, what'd you have for breakfast this morning? She's like, what do you mean? I was like, what'd you have for breakfast this morning? She's like, Coach, they're going. I was like, I know, but you're not going to leave until you tell me what you had for breakfast. And so I had cereal. And I was like, was it good? Did you have it with milk? What, like, how'd you have it? She's like, would you stop? I was like, would you go have fun? And she'd be like, okay, fine. And she'd go and she'd be out of her head and we'd be able to play. And so I think it's the biggest thing is finding those individual things, right? Like the question I get all the time on recruiting calls is, what kind of coach are you? What kind of person are you? Like I tell people all the time, I hate the question because I'm different for every person because every single person that we come into contact with is different. So if I can't coach all y'all the same, like in my opinion, I'm not a good coach, right? And so I will tell people all the time, I may fail at a lot of things in life. I won't fail at this. So I'm going to be the best I possibly can be. So yeah, but I think it's a lot of time, honestly. You got to know people. You got to know what pushes them. You got to understand kind of their background a little bit. Like every recruit call, first question, tell me about your family. What do your parents do? Do you have brothers, sisters, older, younger? What are they involved in? Blah, blah, blah. Just because I want to know what that home life looks like. How busy is mom and dad? How busy is mom taking your four brothers to all the sporting events? Okay. Do you have an appreciation for that? So these different aspects, just to see where people are at, I think is ultimately how you push the buttons the best you can.
Yeah, I think those are great. The interjection of a distraction, essentially, to bring them back to center and balance and fun, I think is a great tool. Even though you didn't describe it that way, it's just an anecdote, right? Challenging a kid to do something they don't think they can do just because. What's the downside? I love that. What, as we think about your growth, and you mentioned I coached football, I've coached track and field, I've coached soccer. How do those, in your reflection, inform one another in your approach to teaching or to coaching or to training? Where I think we have been for a while, and it's getting worse, are in this age of specialization for sure, but also tunnel vision in regards to I'm a soccer coach. Let me go to all these soccer clinics where it's also you can just go to tennis practice and probably get something just as valuable. So
Yeah.
would love your take on that and what you've learned specifically and anything else you've been able to glean from other programs, coaches, humans that aren't necessarily in your primary discipline.
Yeah, so for sure. So I think coaching football, like it teaches you, because like in soccer, a lot of times you'll think, okay, it's too much. If we show film, if we do this, if we do this, like it's too much. Football, all it is prep, right? Like you're in the film room all the time. They got to know reads, they got to know plays. And so for me, being able to coach football, one, you're talking about technique of your back pedal as a cornerback, how you flip your hips. That relates really well to playing as a defensive player in soccer, right? In track and field, all about your explosion, how you come out. I've used a warm up now for 15 years. It's a mixture between soccer and track. And to this day, like when our guys, unless they don't run through it fully, like we don't get soft tissue injuries. And so because we're prepping them because we'll like a soccer warm up, we'll prep for soccer, but you don't prep for the explosive movements that are coming out, which is what soccer is. It's explosive 3-step movements a lot of times. And so we'll prep. So that's taught me that. It's also given me some really nice workouts for the off season when we want to really push them. And that's informed that. When I want to teach, when we're talking about transition in soccer, we win the ball, how quickly can we go to goal? I don't use soccer drills. I go and use basketball drills. I go watch basketballs because that's the closest game, right? And when we attack on transition, we're going to attack with 3 to 4 players. We're not going to attack with 11. And so if you think about it in 11v11, that's just not realistic. So I'll watch hockey practices. I'll watch basketball practices. When we talk about angles and spreading the field, like I've used some stuff from Aussie rules football before. If I have guys that overrun the ball, so let's say we play the ball into midfielder and then they're always overrunning the return pass and it's getting played behind them, we'll go get a rugby ball out and we'll go play rugby. You got to stay behind the ball now because you can only kick it forward. You got to throw it backwards. So now you got to stay behind it. So it's just different things that we'll use just to teach little aspects of it. I think the biggest thing is in any athletics event is, are you athletic? Which I think we lose a lot of times. Like we have a junior high track team that will practice on our track at times. And I watch the kids run and I'm like, okay, we need to teach you how to run, right? But are you athletic? Do you understand how to position your body to be efficient in your next movement? And I think that's where we lose so much in specialization is We lose these little elements that naturally train the body and the mind of I need to be positioned here so I can go here, right? Like in basketball, if I'm constantly catching the ball at the 3-point line with my back to the basket, you're putting me on the bench, right? The amount of times I have guys in soccer that will receive with their back to the rest of their team to advance the ball. Like we did a practice yesterday or 2 days ago, and I would have thought I blew their minds because I was like, open your body to this level. But if they play basketball, that's going to naturally happen because they're naturally in that aggressive forward mindset to the goal. And then too many times, like I said, in soccer, it's just, oh, I'm going to come to the ball. I'm going to be backwards about it. Think about any other sport you play. Like you don't do that. And so I think you can learn a lot of stuff from a lot of different ways. And I've taken our baseball coach back at Central. I asked our assistant because he'd give numbers. And I was like, what are you calling out? He said 5-4-5. What is that? Oh, it's depth for the midfield. I'm like, okay, or for the outfield, sorry. Depth for the outfield. I was like, okay. And so then I'm like, okay, how can I use that? How can I use like these things, real quick calls just to get a message across? Because again, I don't get timeouts. Like I don't get mound visits. So how do I get a message across when it's chaotic? So just little things like that, I think you can pull from every sport if you just are willing to learn and listen.
Yeah, no doubt. I love that analogy, especially because I'm constantly asking my baseball and softball coaches over the years. It's like, why don't you just give them a wristband and call numbers? It'll make your pitching calls a whole lot quicker. And I learned that coaching youth softball 10 years ago, where my assistant, who's the pitching coach, is on the bucket giving signs, and
Yeah.
then the other one's got all the wristbands, and it's to your point, 5-4-5, which is like pitch, location, speed, whatever it is, and not just
Yeah.
the pitcher. Now all the infielders know as well, and so
Yeah.
it's an interesting approach. I also love the way in which you use the rugby analogy. It's okay, let's take the known away and give them something else which depends on them being behind, especially in soccer where you do a lot of like reversals, and that
Yeah.
forces that versus you just trying to talk through it. So I think any way to steal from these other disciplines and make them play with those rules and then what translates is great. And I think the reason it's such a big deal for me is I'm constantly trying to push back against the machine when kids are telling me, Coach, I need to go play club soccer. I said, no, you don't. You need to go play football. You need to go run track and field. And so, how do you reconcile your belief system there with what the club system is doing to sports and pulling at these kids and almost, I don't want to say lying to them, but not necessarily framing the value of the other things they're being asked to no longer do? Because you were been deep in the club system your whole life, right? So how do you
Yeah.
reconcile those two? I don't want to say competing interests, but there's definitely a
Yeah.
tension arc in between them, especially the way you just framed your belief, right? So
Yeah.
talk to me about
Yeah.
that.
No. So my personal belief is that up until your eighth grade year, or maybe even your ninth, because again, we all develop differently. Like we should be multi-sport. Like you should be multi-sport and trying different things, seeing what you like, what you don't. And then once you get eighth grade, ninth grade year, then yeah, I think you do need to start to hone in on where your gifts are, where your passion is for sure. And so I think that's where like clubs should come in. Now, of course, how do I frame it? The reality is it's $1 billion, multi-billion dollar business, and I am not going to be in that
17,
position. I'm
17
yeah,
billion.
I'm not going to be in that position power to be able to make those changes. So until I am, like, I'm going to do my absolute best. I typically coach the older age groups because that's where I am at my best. I know some great coaches who are fantastic at U12, U13, U14. Could I coach that level? Of course. Would I be as good as them? No, because all my pedagogy, all my experience is typically on the older side. And so that's where I know how to push buttons better than maybe that age group. But yeah, I think they should be able to play, right? I think they should. Like I've got guys that play for me high level clubs that are still running track and still doing stuff. Again, I'm a track guy, so I'm not gonna say no to that. Right. No, but again, it's about the commitment. And for me, it's the biggest thing is okay, if you're gonna do multi sport in high school ages, I have no problem with that. But if you're going to do multi-sport, you have to be committed to both, right? Like you can't back burner. Like you have to be committed, which means if you're going to track on Tuesday, Thursday, and you're soccer Monday, Wednesday, Friday, you need to understand the lessons that were taught on Tuesday and Thursday. And then you need to make sure that your fitness levels are up for your So if you're running 100 meters, you need to be overtraining and getting your 150s, 200s in if you don't get them in at practice. So that way you're ready to compete. And then when you're going to miss, you need to learn how to communicate to the coach, not your mom, not your dad. Like you need to learn how to communicate to your coach. Coach, this is my schedule this week. This is where I'm at. For both coaches, is there a problem with that? Anything like that? Again, I coached at a private Christian school. There were a lot, like I said, 200 kids, right? So all of our guys were multi-sport. So like I didn't get half my men's team for soccer until football was over. So like we're going and then we're getting like 2 days of training and then playing our first game. And so we had to work with that and we had to understand that. But for me, that's the biggest thing. And I'll do this to my club guys all the time because they're U19s and they'll be like, they won't mark their attendance if they're going to be at practice or whatever. And I'm like, hey, get on there. This is not your mom and dad's job. Like, I had a kid show up late. And I'm like, he's like, my mom. I'm like, don't even try. No, that doesn't fly with me. Like, you have a car, right? Your car is nicer than mine. Like, you're more than responsible enough to be able to say, hey, coach, I'm running late. I'm so sorry. I'll be there. For me, that's the biggest part. And I think that we miss some of those sometimes, especially as we go specialized, because you miss that opportunity to have those conversations. But yeah, like I do think you should do multiple sports through. Now, my club will be like, no, don't say that because we need them in our stuff. But it's just the reality.
So right
These
there,
kids,
that's the tension, right?
yeah.
Where not that you're being told not to, but it's we need them for X. It's what do you really
Well, we
need them
got to pay
for?
our bills,
Yeah.
right? Like I get paid to coach club, like
Yeah.
hands up fully for
Yep.
sure. It's part of how I make my bills because college coaches do not make great money unless you're American football or high level basketball. But
Right.
college soccer coaches at NAIA level are not making great money. So
Right.
we're not able to sustain just off this.
Yeah.
But yeah. So like, of course I get paid for it and I have to do that. But at the
Yep.
same time, it's again, there's no reason that like club practices for the most part practice twice a week.
Yeah.
There's no reason they can't do another sport. Now, again, now you have to, but again, for me, it makes you a better coach too, because if you know that Johnny is doing your team and he's also doing wrestling, if he had a hard wrestling practice on Thursday, you have a practice on Friday and you play on Saturday. Well, now you've got to work on your periodization on what his levels look like in difference to the team, because that's what all high level coaching education in soccer will teach you, that you work everyone different levels. So it's not just, oh, we just go on this level all the time. Like it's all different within the team, within the people. And then from there, you have to get him fresh and stuff like that. So then it makes you better too, because you have to actually really think about, okay, so I know he had a wrestling duel on Thursday. We have this practice on Friday. We play on Sunday. Okay. If I push him hard on Friday, he's not recovered from the exertion on Thursday, and I'm potentially putting him at risk of injury on Sunday. Okay, so how do I put him in a position? So maybe I put him as a +1 as a neutral. So his physical load isn't high, but his mental load, his social load, his psychological load is still involved in the team. So he's still there. He's still helping. He's understanding the concepts. So now maybe instead of doing a 5v5, I do a 5v5 +1. And then we're able to maintain his load, but we're able to get him into the elements of what we need for Sunday.
Yeah.
So doing those things help.
Is that +1 like advantage disadvantage, or it's just like he's a sub and he gets less rest to recover?
So like in soccer, a lot of times we'll work through like overloads. Right? So we'll do +1s.
So it's an
You'll be on
advantage
the
disadvantage.
outside, and yeah, so you're always playing with the team in possession. So you can put him in the middle, and then you have a central overload. We put him on the outside. So anytime we want to manage workload, we'll put him outside. So sometimes we'll call them bumpers in soccer. You'll put him outside, and so now their physical load is minimal to what the guys inside the grid are working. But you're still involved. You're still getting touches on the ball. You're still with that social aspect, which I think is also very important, of interacting with your teammates, of talking, of calling for the ball, of working your body shape to receive to play, all these different elements. So you're still getting all those without the physical output.
Yep. No, that makes sense. Okay. Same vein, but different subtopic. You mentioned you started the men's and the women's program, taking the co-ed version and doing that. I'm assuming that means they didn't play in the same season, or they did and you just had to juggle that.
No, they did. Yeah, they did. We played it back to back. So the girls would play and then the guys would play.
Okay.
Which actually really set me up for when last year when I coached at Central Christian and was coaching both. So the girls would play, the guys would play. So running my practices would be right after one another. We'd have a 15-minute overlap where the assistant coaches would do the warm-up for the guys while I was finishing off with the girls program. Finish off the girls. The assistant coach would close the girls with their post-practice talk, prayer, stuff like that. And I'd immediately go over to the guys and we're jumping into session. And then on the game day, you're talking about girls play, And then you got about 30 minutes in between. Guys are doing their warm up or finishing off their warm up. You're trying to decompress to then be able to step back up and change your viewpoint. And now here we go, which is always fun. And then for me, doing both, what I think one of the things that I learned that you don't think you don't realize you can learn, I'd already been taught at a young age from a coaching mentor to not be a dickhead to the referees. But when you have to coach 2 games in a row with the same crew, guess what? You're really good in that first game. Like, you don't push things on that first game. But I remember when I was first started coaching, again, when I first went to club, I was 18, maybe 19. And so we're coaching. It's a little kids game. The ref's not calling something. I'm like, what are you doing? Blah, blah, because I'm a teenager. And there's a guy, his name was Blake Amos. He ran Sting Soccer Club West when we first started Sting Soccer Club West, which in the Dallas area, they'll know how that's a long time ago. But he was the associate head coach at TCU, Texas Christian University, and then went to club once like Title IX came into effect and they had to shut down the men's program over there. And he told me, he goes, have you ever changed a ref's mind? And I'm like, no. He said, so try this. Instead of getting upset about a call, if it's in the first half, at halftime, go to him like, hey, on this call, what did you see? Because this is what I saw, and I just want to know how to teach my kids and also to train my eyes to see as well. He goes, and watch how much that changes things for you. And so ever since then, like, I've done that. And we do that with our assistant coaches. Like, my bench, they're not allowed to talk to the ref. Like, of course, they'll be like, and I'll be like, hey, they immediately stop. My assistant coaches, last year, we had the assistant coaches would run the reserve team at Central. I remember we were at a tournament, and I sent one of my coaches, like, at halftime, go ask him, hey, what was this? What was this? And so he did, and he went out there, and I'm sitting on the sideline. He's at half field. I just see him go, and I'm like, he lost it. And then I went to the center as he was coming back from halftime. And I was like, what did he say? He said, hey, what did you see here? And then when I told him, he started to argue. And I was like, I could tell with his hands. I go, I apologize. That's not what he was meant to do. Yeah. He's like, no, I appreciate that you gave him the opportunity to go and do it. And when I talked to him, when he came over, I go, the moment your hands went like this, I go, you lost it. He's, yeah, I know, I felt it.
Yeah.
But it's just that learning point. And Blake gave me that decades ago. And so I'm still passing that lesson off that Blake gave me when I was 19 to other people, because it's made it such a, like, I can talk to refs and I don't get yellow cards. I don't get red cards. Like, I can get on them now too, because I've built a relationship with them. Same as with the players, right? We build a relationship with them because you're going to have the same refs. Because again, especially now, there's nobody reffing. So you're going to have the same refs. So if you build relationships with them and they know that you're coming from a good place, like, they're always going to be more willing to listen. Like, they're human beings at the end of the day. So they're always going to be more willing to listen. And that was such a huge lesson I learned from doing both, though, is how to, again, I had to play a long game. So while the players are playing that in that moment, I'm playing a 2-game series right here. So I'm playing a baseball series basically while everybody else is playing a soccer match. Yeah. And I'm like, I got to work this because I can't have this guy pissed off at me in the second game.
Yeah, no doubt. And it's funny because that same approach works for your athletes, right? Where our natural wiring is to tell them what happened. And it's the same question. What did you see there? I saw this. Okay, that's not what happened, but no worries. Now I know like where you are from a perspective standpoint.
Yeah.
And I think the more we do that, to your point, the more your rapport grows, the more that you're actually going to get the benefit of the doubt when it matters. I actually had a really good friend of mine a couple years ago asked me after a game, he's like, why do you get every call? And it's like, because I'm not an asshole to the refs, because I just carry on dialogue. I ask them how they're doing. I talk to them about their families. You see them all the time. I know their names. And it's that question. It's, hey, what did you see there? I saw this. Okay, cool, man. Thanks. Or, hey, can you keep an eye on this? Okay, thank you. And then whatever happens, in your point of when have you ever seen a ref change their mind? And it's very rarely, but I have seen them and been the beneficiary of, hey, I missed that one, I'll get the next one, where you've now built that trust and you get to say the same thing, right? It's, hey, I missed that too. Good job. That was a good call. However you build that relationship, I think is super important. All right, I got a couple more things that I'm curious about, and I don't want to lose sight of my list here. So my other, and this genuine curiosity as an athletic director, who is part of the league scheduling group, etc. And as we try to figure out the schedules across all sports. And when I share the draft, my soccer coaches are much more likely to make a comment or a reference about the periodization of games during a week versus even say my lacrosse coaches where it's like physical collisions, right? And
Yeah.
why? They're running a tournament where they play 2 games in a day and then it's playing 2 games in a row back-to-back days. It doesn't work. And I'm like, okay, hold on. As a basketball coach, we'll play 4 games in a week in the preseason, right? We'll go Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Hell, in Texas, they're playing tournaments where you're playing 2 games a day for 3 straight days. So you go to club tournaments, you play multiple
Yeah.
things. Genuine curiosity, help me understand why it is not safe for soccer teams to play like back-to-back games or multiple beyond 2 games in a week
Yeah.
and because I just don't get it. And I would love to be more supportive in a way where it's okay, that makes sense, but I haven't figured it out yet.
Yeah. So you see it in club, right? Like club, they'll go play 3 games a weekend. That doesn't mean it's right. Like that's just because that's the way it's done does not mean it's right. You're not considering the kids. Like a friend of mine just played in the Dallas Cup, which is a massive tournament, right? His girls played 9 games in 9 days. That's insane. I think the biggest thing is one, a lot of times you find times where you're switching surfaces, which can have a very different impact on your body. So and even turf to turf, turfs are completely different, right? So there's a really big injury risk with those things when you're switching surfaces. The other part is if you talk about your center mid's probably putting 7 to 9 miles in every game, right? If they're a good center mid. The other part is so basketball, you have 5, but you're probably 8, 9 deep on most teams decently. Soccer, a lot of times, especially school, you're lucky if you're the starting 11 deep. You might only be 8. Maybe you're 12, maybe you're 13.
Or
So you're not, yeah.
whatever.
So I've seen teams where you're like, oh, that's one kid, the only kid that plays club. Everybody else is just out there for fun. And that's fine. But again, as a coach, you want to win, right? So if your player is playing 90 minutes, 2 games, now they're playing 180 minutes, there's no recovery. It's a lot of mileage on them, especially if it is 4. Again, guess what? They're putting in 10 to 12 miles. So it's just a lot of mileage, right? And everyone thinks of in the old days, you would always talk about soccer was like soccer kids would always go run cross country because it's just an aerobic sport. It's not an aerobic sport, it's an anaerobic sport. Like it's short, quick sprints, recovery, and go, right? So it's different. So you think about 12 miles of running at a single pace and then going and running 12 miles again. Like, okay, that's part of marathon training, right? Like guys do that and you work your way up to that. But soccer's not that. Like you're talking about 12 miles of sprints and then recovery, sprint, recover, sprint, recover, sprint, and how much you're draining your anaerobic system, your glycolytic system of energy. Like you need really, we go off 72 hours, but you really need 96 hours just to recover your body back to what the state of where you started the game. And so that's why it's really hard to play 2 games in a row, is because one, you're just not going to have the depth. It's just the reality. Like my club team is really deep. Like we have a really good club team that we built. It's really deep. Guess what? I still have 4 players that I play 90 minutes every game because the second to them are good players, but my guys at 60% are still better than their 100%, right? And then we play in the top division for the club and everything. So like we have a responsibility to show well for the club as well in this national platform. And we're trying to contend for nationals and all this other stuff, right? So there's all these different parts that go into it for us. But yeah, if you think about it, you want your 100-meter, 200-meter sprinter to go run 9 miles worth of 100 meters and then go out the next day and do it? No, because periodization with track is we go hard day, we go easy day, medium day, right? And so you're working on your periodization. So if you go run 10 by 200s in under 26 seconds, you're not going to have them then go run 10 by 200s in under 24 seconds. And so the next day. And so it's a similar concept. I think what gets lost is you see people walking, right, in the game, and you're like, oh, it's not that exertion. Again, some positions, no. But your forwards, if you're a direct team and you're playing long balls, your forwards are running 7 to 8 miles. Your center mids are going to be running. If you're a possession-based team like my team is, your center mids cover anywhere between 6 to 9 miles a game in sprints, in change of direction, and those things. So if you think about the level of ACLs in soccer, a lot of it's because of fatigue.
Yeah.
So you're cutting, changing directions. Again, how much exertion, how much have you put? Now all of a sudden your quad and your hamstring aren't firing as strong because they're fatigued. Oh, there goes the knee.
Yeah. Yeah. No doubt. Okay. That's super helpful. Thank you. The way in which that mileage adds up, the way in which it isn't right, this consistent pacing, it is bursting and recovering, definitely has an impact. The other thing, just listening to you talk, is 90 minutes versus 32, right? And
Yeah.
the timeouts, the quarter breaks, the things that you don't necessarily get in soccer. So that's helpful. I appreciate that. Okay, a couple more. Texas versus Oklahoma and Kansas. I want to say approach, but the vibe of athletics in each of those spaces, right? Obviously, you're in a college at the Kansas and Oklahoma standpoint, but now you've been in these different places. How do they compare? What's the appropriate balance if Texas is on this end, right?
Yeah.
What have you been able to take away from that and find bouncing around different states? Because especially at the high school level, you have the National Federation of High Schools,
Yeah.
but then you have state policies as well, especially in basketball. Shit, half the states still don't have a shot clock, which is asinine. But ultimately, like, give like a quick overview of kind of the difference that you found in those different areas.
Yeah. So born and raised in Texas, lived there for the vast majority of my life, right? So Texas, like you play club all year long, you're playing club and high school at the same time. So again, if you're in Texas and your high school coaches are complaining, it's because those kids just played club games as well. And just trust me, as a club coach, we complain about high school because they're playing them 5 games in 3 days because of rainouts and stuff. So yeah, so like it's all the time everywhere. Up north of us, because I've been in Nebraska as well. And when high school's in, clubs don't play. And it's been the weirdest thing to me. My biggest adjustment. What do you mean I can't train my team because they're in high school season? I've got 7 kids that have been knocked out of playoffs. Why can't I train them? They'll be suspended 3 games the next year. What? That doesn't make sense. Or I remember in Nebraska, I don't even know if it's here yet in Kansas. I haven't even looked at it. But I remember in Nebraska, if it was during high school season, you couldn't even go to a college ID camp. And I'm like, why? Like they would get suspended if they went to a college ID camp. I'm like, that doesn't make sense. Like the whole premise is right is that we're preparing them for their next step in life, whether that's college, whether that's work, whether that's what military, whatever it is. We're preparing them for their next step. If their next step they want it to be college and potentially athletics in college, and they have the ability to go to an ID camp to see if a school is they like it or not, why would you not let them? Like why would that cost them high school games? And so there's this, and I think obviously it's like society, right? There's a control. I have to have control. You have to have control. All those things. So that's been the one side. The other part for me is DFW because I'm from the Dallas area. DFW club sports obviously are massive, are just a giant thing. But it's been interesting because some of the most toxic club environments I've been at, I've actually been at the smaller areas that I've been in, like the much smaller areas where it's, oh, I don't like what you said. I'm just going to start my own club. You know, like, wait, what? Oh, we're just going to completely water down this talent pool that we have in our smaller area. And then we're going to go complain why we can't compete at the national level versus the California teams, the Texas teams, the Florida teams, whatever. I'm like, you only have so many kids. And then y'all are watering down because y'all can't talk. That's what I really enjoy about. So I'm in the Wichita area for club. So I'm in a club called Sporting Wichita. Man, like the environment at that club has been so good. And even the environment within Wichita soccer is so like there's 2 big clubs and but we don't like butt heads. Like of course we're not for each other. It's competition, but we're not toxic to each other. So it's been very nice because that's not been the case in obviously in the Dallas area. It is for the most part it's really good, but then there's also a ton of toxicity because it's a massive metroplex.
Yeah.
The Oklahoma City area was not that way. Omaha area was not that way. So this area has
Why?
been
I
really nice.
think in the Wichita, in Oklahoma City, it's not that way. Whereas in the DFW, it is, or like in Los Angeles or Sacramento, or shit, even locally, like you said, we're a small area and you've got too many basketball clubs for the talent. And then
Yeah.
you get people sniping. But why do you think in some places it works?
I think and this is my complete hypothesis. Like this is not my opinion. Dallas, I think it works because there's so many that you get to know who's actually the really good ones and who's not.
Mhm.
And so that kind of just feeds. And then there's so many kids. So you can even be a terrible coach and still have a good team. Just there's just so much talent. And so I think that kind of leads it. I think in the other areas I've been in, it's so much about ego. Because I've got to be the big dog here. I've got to be the big dog here. One of the things that the reason why Wichita's been so good to me is because like the leadership I have, and I just moved into that leadership position as well. But that leadership that's at that club is so humble that it makes it work. Like they're so about the kids and about we could charge so much more and then go have our own facility and stuff like that. And we don't. Like, is it expensive? Yes, because club's always expensive. But that compared to even what kids were paying in Omaha or what kids were paying in Oklahoma City for the level of what they get with us, like it's been so much better. But I think that's the big thing. It's like the smaller the areas, the more of it, the ego seems about look at me. Dallas, there's so many coaches. It's look at me. That's fine, but you're in this area and there's 55,000 other coaches right here that we're looking at as well. So I think you can't really move yourself to the top of that
Yeah.
kingdom, if you will, but in the smaller areas you can, or they
Yeah.
try to.
All right, from that standpoint, we're making these comparisons about like big versus small. It sounds like you spent the majority of your life collegiately in what I would call the small college world. What's that experience like compared to what most of the world sees, which is become this behemoth of a collegiate industry and the Power Fours and all of that stuff? And I don't know if you have any behind the curtains, but you definitely have a network who is there. But
Yeah.
what's it like for people that are maybe at the front end, maybe looking at making a transition from high school to college? You've done both. But what's the reality of like small college athletics versus big college athletics versus high school, small high school, big high school? What wisdom can you share after 20 years, 25 years of doing this that you can offer others that like they just don't know what they don't know?
Yeah, no, I think if people get into coaching, they'll go to college coaching. I want to be a college coach. First thing, if you want to be a college coach, is realize you're not actually a coach. I coach. If I didn't do club, like my actual life, probably 5 to 10% of my time is coaching. Everything else is administrative, recruiting. If we had a grass field, landscaper, like taking care of the field, like legitimately painting walls. I've been at schools where I painted walls, had to paint my office, had to paint locker rooms, had to. The last school I was at, I had to take care of our field, so I put in 150 hours every summer on our field, getting it ready for the fall and those things. So there's so many other parts that go back into it that you don't realize, and I think that's the other part is when you go small college, especially and it's the same big college, but especially when you go small college, man, your spouse or your person or your partner, they have to understand you can't just be like, oh yeah, it's going to be a lot of hours. Y'all got to sit down and really talk. So I'm blessed to be in a very strong relationship. But like when we started dating, I was like, we started dating in May and I'm like, we are not going to even talk serious until we get to October because you need to see what season looks like and what my time looks like and stuff like that. Right. And so we went through that and she's like, what as bad as I thought? I'm like, you're an angel. So you are the best person in the world because that's crazy. But yeah, there's just so much that you put in. And if you think you're going to work 40 hours, that's funny. Try 100, try 120. And again, different pressures at the bigger schools. Now you've got, man, like both of us have financial ramifications, right? Us working at smaller schools, your margin is small, right? So if you make a mess up, man, you're potentially putting a school at risk, right? If you give too much big money to recruits, scholarship wise, if you go over your scholarship budget, man, like you're hurting a school. Like you're really hurting a lot of people. And we can go back and forth on the scholarship stuff, but that's the way I always look at it is like, I've got to be on budget. And I know I want more because I want to be successful. But if I'm not on budget, like there's so many other people in academics that are losing their jobs, right? There's so many people that work in the cafeteria, that work in maintenance, that work in all over that this campus provides for that are losing their jobs because I'm irresponsible, right? And then bigger college, of course, same thing. But now you're talking millions of dollars and NIL and really pushy, successful people that like to be right all the time. And you have to deal with that part. So, yeah, so I know some coaches that are in that world and they're like, I just want to go D3 now. or I just want to go JUCO now because I'm tired of dealing with this part.
Yeah.
With that comes the higher paychecks, the bigger money, the connections that can really help change your life. If you do get out of coaching, oh, look, that person will fund you to start a business.
Yeah.
Oh, look, you got a business partner now. So it has its trade offs each way. But yeah, the biggest thing for me is it's not actually coaching.
Yeah.
It's administrative, it's landscaping, it's psychology.
Yeah.
You need to understand sport management if you're going to become a college coach for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's fascinating that you said that because one of the themes over 300 episodes is me asking that question, which is, hey, 15% of what you do once you become the head coach is coaching. If you want to coach, stay an assistant because as soon
Yeah.
as you move chairs, now all that admin, all the logistics, and your and what you just shared, the maintenance, right? Like the things that you didn't sign up for that aren't sexy,
No.
that you realize, oh wait, this is part of it. And then right at your not your level, but in that world, it's like what'd you say? I'm making $1,000 a month. It's like when I was coaching Division II college basketball in 1998, I made $6,000 for the year. And it's one of the reasons that I went to high school and have stayed is my wife was getting ready to go to grad school, and she's like, "You need to get a job." And I'm like, "I have a job." She's like, "No, a real one that pays because I'm going back to school." It's okay. I guess I'm doing something else. And so I
Yeah.
think your ability to chase that dream while keeping all the various balls in the air to keep the lights on, to find a partner who is on board with that. And I laugh at that because I've got colleagues who are like, hey, my spouse is giving me grief about this. And it's, yo, she knew who she married. And it's,
Did she though?
and
No.
that's the thing. If you connect while you're deep in the weeds on this, then yeah, they know. If
Yeah.
you had relationship and then suddenly one of you decides to get into coaching, that might not be what you signed up for. So it's a
Yeah.
little
No.
bit different beast. So I love your approach. Hey, we're not going to talk about this until I get through the season. There's no point. So good. Wrapping up, I am very curious, especially in this era of tribalism and polarization, of how we are maintaining a growth mindset and challenging our belief system when that is not what society wants you to do. And so I'm curious, like, what have you recently changed your mind on? And it doesn't have to be coaching. It can be whatever you
Yeah.
want, but where it's like, hey, you know what? Like I used to be over here and pretty dug in, and now I'm over here, and here's why. Because the algorithms push us a different direction, right? They're all this echo chamber stuff. And how are we actively, as coaches and leaders, modeling that for our athletes who are the next generation when all of the different things pulling at their attention, that's the furthest thing from what they're getting taught to do. So just out of curiosity, something that you've changed your mind on, and more importantly, like why, and how do you maintain that approach of growth mindset and challenging your beliefs and having truth tellers and all these things that aren't natural anymore?
Yeah. So I think for me, I'll probably answer this a little different than probably what you asked. For me, the biggest thing, like I've always believed I'm a good coach because I know I don't know everything and I go seek information. But and like I've said, like I'll seek it from everything. So like my biggest thing recently has been a ton of Nick Saban, a ton of PJ Fleck, a ton of Randy Waldrum, who's at Pitt on women's soccer, a ton of Anson Dorrance, who was at North Carolina women's soccer forever. Just these people who have led really well, right? Corey Close, who just won the national championship for UCLA women's basketball. Such a countercultural message of how she leads her team to everyone else and what you see all the time. There's a group of videos out, and they'll come to soccer convention most years, and I go to all of them. Is what drives winning, and the things they talk about, and how they connect with players, and how you connect to the deeper meaning behind sports. Dan Abraham, sports psychologist, massively impactful for me. So I've really pushed into things outside of my sport and how I go. Saban for me is such a big one because he was so process driven. Because again, like for us, it's training, right? So it's training. So I've got to be really clean on our processes because that's the only thing I can control. Like I literally can't control anything in my sport. Like it's the tough. For me, it's one of the toughest sports to coach. As someone who's coached other sports, it's one of the toughest ones because I don't have timeout. Like I covered for a men's volleyball coach. I got to call a timeout, and I was like, "Oh, this is nice. I like this." but but that's the biggest thing is how do we put in processes that go? That's where my probably biggest growth has been over the past year and a half. The other thing is like when you go through the coaching licenses in soccer,
Yeah.
because you have to have licensure in soccer, so it's a little bit different.
Super different than everything else, by the way.
Yeah,
But keep
doesn't make you a better coach because
No,
I
but
have a
there's
P license.
curriculum. There's
Yeah,
like places you can go
yeah,
with the, I don't want to call it USA Soccer, but World Soccer, whatever the
yeah,
governing body has put together training curriculum for all coaches so that at a baseline, they've had an
yeah,
introduction to process and pedagogy.
yeah. But you'll go and you'll run a session, and you'll run a session in a setup that you will never run in real life because it's got it like they want it in a certain area just to see that you can progress a session from a moment in the game. And so you take things away from that if you're open minded, or you close minded to it and you're like, they just want me to be a robot and just do what they say. They're testing and pushing things. So I think it's all about mindset. And again, challenging for me, if you would have asked me 5 years ago, for me, our sessions always looked different. We wouldn't do the same things over and over again. Now I do a lot more repetition of stuff. I'll repeat exercises a lot, but I'll change the focus or I'll change the constraints to get more out of it. And obviously now you get more learning because again, I've just developed more of a deeper understanding of pedagogy, of how people learn, of how much you retain the first time you're introduced to a topic, to the second, to the third, to the fourth. And so, like for us, like our session plans now are totally different than we were 3 years ago. So now we come up, we do a warm up, we do a small area possession with limited touches. So there's a lot of quick decision making. We'll do a medium area. We'll go into our game model, like how we're going to play, like two different sections of that. And then we're playing at the end, whether that's 5v5, 77, nines, 11s, or we're going attack versus defense. We're working in certain areas and those things. But yeah, I think a lot of it is just really getting deeper to understand the details and how they translate to players. Like we actually had a training last night, practice last night, and my DOC, my director of coaching's son, plays for me, and he pulls off this really nice footwork section in the top of the box and scores a goal. And I looked at his dad and I was like, I go, I love that you didn't do it at midfield. And his dad was like, he goes, yeah, you finally pulled it here. And I told him, I go, I blame you. I'm joking with him, but I was half serious. And he's like, why? I was like, you always, because he always does this really fancy footwork stuff. And that's exactly what his son did. It was great. But it's his dad's footwork, and you could tell. And I was like, I go, you always do that, but you always do it in middle of the park. I go, and that's where he always pulls it. I was like, you never do it in the box. I was like, so you're not tying that to him. And we had just gone to the B license together as well. So he was like, he goes, no, you're right. I was like, I'm joking. He's like, no, but you're right on it. And I was like, I don't know if I'm right, but I think there probably is a tie that if we move it there, maybe it's more successful for our guys. And it's just those small things, those small little ties. And again, the biggest thing that comes to experience. So the biggest thing I would say to anybody is, man, go get mentors. Like I have some mentors, but guess what? I don't have necessarily mentors that I can call that are coaching all at the highest level all the time. So guess what? I got this great thing called YouTube, and I can go watch Nick Saban conversations, and I can go watch. I've been watching Albert Brenneman, I think is what his name is. He does all these conversations with like mostly football coaches of how they go in, how they're running their programs, what their keywords are, what their phrases are, what's the important things for them. And I'm just picking pieces out from each one of those all the time.
They can also go to watch Contacts Coaching Podcast and watch the wisdom of people like you moving forward. So dig into that. There's almost 300 episodes there for you, and this has been one of the best conversations I've had in a while. So I appreciate you taking the time to jump on, even if it is the earliest slot on the calendar. But appreciate you, Coach. Thanks for taking the time out with us today.
Thank you, Justin. Appreciate it.